Welcome back into the Lions 24/7 podcast. I am Tyler Donahue. We'll be joined just momentarily by Tyler Calvaruso, and then beyond him, Brian Dohn, our extraordinary national recruiting analyst and insider, will hop on board to break down this Penn State freshman class. Many of those pieces are already on campus. He's going to give us greater insight into a couple of those recent transfer portal pickups on offense, and former five-star offensive tackle Nolan Rucci and former five-star receiver Julian Fleming, who went elsewhere in the Big Ten before ultimately coming back to State College to wrap up their college careers now. Brian will give us a lot of really good intel on both of those guys and some of the new faces around campus. But we begin with news that has broken here on a Thursday. We set the stage a bit on Tuesday with our podcast episode that Penn State primed to pick up a couple of veteran cornerbacks out of the college football transfer portal that came to fruition here on Thursday and in pretty short order. And to break it down with us now is Tyler Calvaruso. And Tyler, these are not names that should be strange to Penn State fans who have followed our coverage at Lions 24/7. Jalen Kimber, who spent this past season with the Florida Gators, and then A.J. Harris, another former five-star prospect who spent his freshman season with the Georgia Bulldogs in 2023. I mean, it looks like they may have just added two starting caliber 2024 players at a prioritized position in a matter of hours. And, let's note this. There's not any drama hanging in the air about these commitments. These guys are on campus, and these guys are underway with their Nittany Lions career. Things happen fast in the transfer portal. Let's get it going here today, Tyler, with these two pickups at cornerback.
Yep, no reason for nerves if you're a Penn State fan anymore. Both these guys are signed, sealed, and delivered in town and ready to roll with the Nittany Lions. Harris has been in town really getting himself situated, and, Kimber is starting classes. So things are getting going there. And, really two quality additions to this cornerback room for Terry Smith, in my opinion. You're starting with Harris. This came about late last week, as it did with Kimber as well, with both those guys making it to campus. Harris was on campus for an official visit leading up to last weekend. Going into that visit, it looked like Penn State had an advantage. It looked like it was in the driver's seat from what we had been hearing. That visit went really well, and Penn State was able to get the deal done. Harris comes to State College as a former five-star prospect with a boatload of talent. We have talked about what he could do potentially in this defense, really since he popped onto the radar. The former five-star skill set. Georgia was excited about him when it signed him. He really just hit the portal looking for an uptick in opportunity and playing time a little bit earlier in his career than it may have presented itself at Georgia, and he's definitely going to have a chance to earn that at Penn State given the nature of the cornerback depth chart. So, he's good in man. He's good in zone. He played more so zone at Georgia in his limited playing time, so I'm interested to see what he could do in man for Penn State. But this is a really high-quality addition for the Nittany Lions, in my opinion. Multiple years of eligibility remaining, so he's going to have ample opportunity to make an impact for this Penn State defense. And then moving over to Kimber, who's a little bit more experienced. He has starting experience from his time at Florida. He's suited up in 25 games for the Gators, after transferring to Florida after starting his career at Georgia, ironically. So two former Georgia cornerbacks entering the fold for Penn State here on Thursday. And really just, it's a different dynamic. Both these guys can contribute in 2024. Kimber has more experience working in his favor. Both these guys will have the chance to come in and compete along with the likes of Zion Tracy, Cam Miller, Elliott Washington. So really, again, I feel like it's hats off to Terry Smith. I think he's done a heck of a job bringing in high-quality competition of this cornerback room, whether it be the younger guys who are already in the room, and now Harris and Kimber via the transfer portal. I think Penn State's cornerback room, tall task replacing the likes of Kalen King, Johnny Dixon, and Daquan Hardy, but you bring in guys like Harris and Kimber, it puts your room in a good place moving forward.
Let's start here. These are guys who were recruited to the Georgia Bulldogs initially out of high school. That doesn't happen for a lot of players across the country. That team won back-to-back national championships. They were a threat to win 3 consecutive national titles here this past season as well. So I know Kimber's career led elsewhere in the SEC to a Florida Gators team that certainly was not as robust from a talent perspective, not nearly as competitive in the SEC, but he logged a lot of snaps down there. But let's start with Harris, because although he doesn't necessarily have those reps accrued at the Power 5 level, said this on the podcast on Tuesday, he is 1 year removed from enrolling at the 2-time defending national champions campus as a 5-star prospect, as one of the top 30 players in America as deemed by 24/7 Sports. And here he is. And I know we have conversations about, well, what does a former 5-star rating necessarily mean as you get into the transfer portal process. I think it's fair to wonder that with a guy like Julian Fleming, who's had injuries pop up, who's been 4 years around the Power 5 level. It's fair to wonder it with Nolan Rucci, 3 years into his college career, hasn't necessarily broken through as a mainstay on a Big Ten offensive line. But what do we learn about this guy? He burned red shirt with arguably the most talented roster in the country this year down in Athens. And now all of a sudden he's strolling into State College with an entire calendar year ahead of him to prepare himself. This to me is and it's probably going to get buried behind the lead of this offseason, which is the Rucci and Fleming homecomings. This to me very well may be the splashiest pickup that Penn State has made in the transfer portal, not necessarily from a headline grabbing perspective. And it's not a good day to grab headlines across college football right now. But I think from the perspective of this helping the team maintain an elite level of play on the perimeter, because if they lose that ability and that part slips, that's going to impact your edge rush. That's going to impact your linebackers. So to me, keeping a clamp on the perimeter, maintaining highest level of performance at that cornerback spot is something that they're really going aggressive with early on in 2024. And AJ Harris could show up and be a star in the making come preseason camp. We'll give him all spring ball to get comfortable.
You could very well argue that if Julian Fleming and Nolan Rucci weren't who they are in terms of being Pennsylvania natives and, guys Penn State was heavily involved with during their high school recruitment, you could argue that this commitment would steal the offseason headlines because you were bringing in a former 5-star who committed to a program where, look, if Georgia head coach Kirby Smart knows one thing, it's a good defensive back when he sees it. And, it speaks volumes when Georgia goes after a guy in the secondary. And, Harris is currently the number 8 player in our transfer portal rankings here at 24/7 Sports. And so not former 5-star recruit who is not far removed from being a 5-star recruit. He's one of the best players in the portal in the entire nation. So that really speaks to the level of talent that Penn State is welcoming into the mix here. Harris he's still developing. He's moldable. He's coachable. And I think that's one thing that really appealed to Penn State throughout this process. I had conversations with people who were a little bit familiar with Harris's process as this was playing out when we received wind that, he was going to be making it to Penn State for a visit. And I mentioned earlier that he was really hitting the portal looking for just more of an opportunity to play meaningful snaps as an underclassman. And the big thing with Harris was as he went through this entire process, played it very close to the vest. But the one thing that was expressed was he wanted to get to a college campus for this spring semester so he could get a head start on competing. He wants to be in the weight room. He wants to be getting his nose into the playbook. He wants to be breaking down film. He wants to be getting comfortable with his teammates, and he wants to be ready to roll by the time spring ball comes around. Because the fact of the matter is AJ Harris is coming to Penn State looking to make some noise and looking to earn himself a starting spot in 2024. He's very confident in his ability. I think, frankly, as he should be. If you throw on some of his high school tape, which you posted for our Lions 24/7 readers, the kid can play. There's no doubt about it. And he's going to be looking to showcase that for Terry Smith and his staff throughout the offseason in the hopes of securing a big-time role in this Penn State secondary in 2024. Do I think he can accomplish that and maybe even work his way into the starting conversation? I think it's definitely feasible. I don't think it's out of the realm of possibility, and I don't think it's an outlandish thing to think. But, we're going to have to see what comes about, as spring ball goes underway. But I'm really excited about what AJ Harris could bring to this cornerback room. Even if it's not right off the bat, I think he's going to be an impact player here at Penn State at some point.
And in the case of both Kimber and Harris, we're not talking about guys who left the Northeast or Mid-Atlantic region to go south and then wanted to come back home. You've got Jalen Kimber out of Mansfield, Texas, with the Timberview program there that is perennial, a Power 5 kind of factory down in the Lone Star State. And then you've got AJ Harris out of the state of Alabama going to Georgia to play high school to play college football. So they don't have roots up here, and maybe they have family up here. I don't know. We're going to get to know these guys. Again, we're just starting to wrap our minds around the fact that they're going to be on that field for spring ball, in a matter of months here and getting the winter conditioning ahead of that. And Tyler, just to bring everybody up to speed on the cornerback position and what they've done. And by the way, I want to note here before we don't, some size involved. Kimber's 6 foot, 185 pounds. You've got AJ Harris right around 6'1", 190 pounds. Again, he's only year 2 on a college campus, so I think he continues to get bigger. So these are not smaller cornerbacks, and I think you get some positional versatility where you've got guys like Cam Miller, who we've seen him attack opponents from the inside. We've seen him play plenty on the perimeter as well. There's options for him and how you want to utilize him. Zion Tracy, such a built-on speed kind of prospect early on in his career, maybe more physicality than we gave him credit for. And Elliott Washington, you want to talk about a blend of elite speed and physicality. Let's see what he can do with another offseason. Remember, he was the January enrollee. He burned red shirt. A lot to like there. You got Lamont Payne, who did not burn red shirt, unlike the other two freshman cornerbacks this year. But you look at him, you see the length. We know that safety and cornerback were both part of discussions coming out of high school. And then don't forget the cornerback transfer they brought in last year after the Storm Duck situation didn't pan out. They brought in Aldavian Collins as a redshirt freshman from the Mississippi State Bulldogs program. So he's more of a developmental piece at this stage. And of course, as we've referenced a few times, the new kids on the block, Antoine Belgrave-Shorter and John Mitchell, a lot to like about that tandem. Played high school ball together down in Jacksonville, and now they look to make their mark at cornerback. So here we are, just less than 2 weeks removed from the bowl game, the Peach Bowl in Atlanta, where it wasn't the prettiest of days for a cornerback room that really had to step up and deal with some losses. And Daquan Hardy was the only one available from that typical trio with Kalen King and Johnny Dixon opting out. How would you assess what James Franklin and Terry Smith have accomplished in fortifying that room? Because it goes from, wow, there's a lot of talent in that room. Can these guys be ready and polished by next September? To there's still a lot of young talent in that room. And now you're adding two guys that have SEC experience and are high caliber talents themselves.
I think that's why the Kimber edition here specifically is kind of probably a bigger deal than people will make it out to be. Penn State's approach at cornerback in the transfer portal this offseason, conversations we had going back to before the portal opened, leading up into the portal was, potentially a more experienced corner. And you saw that pursuit take place early on in the portal cycle when, Penn State tried to get Corey Thornton on campus for an official visit, the UCF cornerback who wound up ironically committing to Louisville, where Kimber was committed to in the portal for a little bit. So you combine Harris's talent with Kimber's talent and what he brings to the table from an experience standpoint. 25 games in the SEC is, nothing to sneeze at. That's significant when it comes to, moving over to another Power 5 program, having to play important snaps against top-tier competition. That he's not going to have to make any sort of adjustment in that regard because he's already well acclimated with it. So I think Kimber's experience, Harris's talent, you add that to a room that already has a bunch of young talent that the Penn State staff is very excited about. I mean, I wrote about it earlier this week. There's still so much excitement about what Zion Tracy and Elliott Washington, the true freshman duo, could accomplish moving forward. You mentioned Lamont Payne. He's another guy who has opened some eyes behind the scenes and done some good things on the practice field. So really, it's just a matter of bolstering the depth. And, we always talk about on the offensive line, could have an quality bodies. The same goes for the secondary as well. So I think Penn State has definitely helped its cornerback room this offseason. I think Harris and Kimber are two pretty significant additions for this Nittany Lions team entering the 2024 season.
They were subject of conversation on our Tuesday episode of the podcast. We appreciate this getting done before we sat down to record the Thursday podcast so we could talk about it in a little different context with Coach A.J. Harris and Jalen Kimber. Before we jump over to Brian Dohn on a lot more about Penn State newcomers and what they're doing behind the scenes there at Lash, Tyler, I wanted to finish with the wide receiver update in the transfer portal. Julian Fleming remains the lone addition at that position. We've talked about it being a multiple kind of position that you want to address in the portal. Keandre Lambert-Smith, Malik Mega, the younger guys, Anthony Ivy, Tyler Johnson, all those names are still on the roster as it was refreshed a bit here in 2024 with a new semester underway. So maybe not as much movement at the receiver spot as we expected. What do we need to know about some of the targets out there or previously targeted players out there?
Yeah, Marcus Higgins is definitely still on the hunt for talent at the position. LaJohntay Wester was a priority target in the portal. Penn State got him on campus for an official visit last weekend. Didn't work out for the Nittany Lions, with Wester ultimately committing to Colorado. So it's on to the next for Higgins and company. And, they're monitoring the portal, seeing what's out there right now. There's another window that's going to have to be monitored as well. There's been contact with the likes of CJ Daniels, the Liberty transfer, Silas Bolden, the Oregon State transfer. Doesn't look like either is necessarily going to make it to campus for a visit. There's been some contact with Shaz Preston, who's a Bama transfer. Again, no word on whether he's going to make it to campus on a visit yet. So really, with Wester going to Colorado, because he was a top of the board target for Penn State, it's kind of, revisiting the guys who are in the portal right now, seeing what's out there talent-wise, potential fit-wise, seeing how those guys can maybe factor in for Penn State if they were to pursue. And then there's that additional portal window that the staff is going to be monitoring as well. So Higgins is definitely looking for another wideout to pair with Fleming before the offseason comes to an end. And I do think that Penn State, will be able to add at the position It's just a matter of who. I think that we might have some more clarity on names moving forward. But right now, that's the state of the board.
Last year, we saw Penn State get Malik McClain on board from Florida State in January, and then Dante Cephas made the move from Kent State in May. We'll see how it times out this year. And by the way, big opening all of a sudden in Tuscaloosa, Alabama. That's going to thrust open a portal window for all the players on that roster, one of the most talented in the country. And there's a good chance that whoever replaces Saban at Alabama is going to result in another portal window being opened at another premier Power 5 conference team. So a lot to follow still and navigate as Penn State keeps tabs on who might be available in the portal. Tyler, appreciate the coverage. A lot going on at the cornerback position all of a sudden. We have a lot more at Lions247.com about both Kimber, Harris, and just everything else happening. Appreciate your coverage, man.
Appreciate it, man. Listeners, stay tuned, man. We got a treat for you guys coming up here.
That's right. Let's jump into that because it is the one and only Brian Dohn hopping on with us on a tremendously busy week across college football. And Brian, first and foremost, hope 2024 is off to a good start with you. I know that 2025 recruiting class has jumped into the spotlight in a lot of ways, but we're going to talk 2024 signees, Penn State. We're going to talk about some familiar names that are all of a sudden Nittany Lions in 2024. But thanks for coming back on the podcast.
Yeah, I appreciate it. And just listening to Tyler before this, I mean, one of the things that works against Penn State in this portal with these things opening up is I believe their ad drop is Sunday night. And you have other schools who haven't even started classes yet. So if you can't get a kid on campus this weekend, and get them enrolled quick, you're going to probably have to wait till the next window if you're Penn State.
Yeah, there's so much monitoring now with the Saban moving on and what's going to happen from that and the ramifications. And we're seeing Penn State fare pretty well here in the transfer portal. I mean, today's been big for the defense. A.J. Harris, Jalen Kimber, cornerbacks that are picked up, both SEC experience, both were significant. Recruits come out of high school and remain that way now. Brian, what overall, seeing what Penn State's doing with some college vets, I know Rucci and Fleming are guys we're going to get into, but how have you kind of assessed what James Franklin and company and their strategy has been early on in the year?
Yeah, I think it's about, I know it's about filling holes. And one thing I've looked at really hard in the last year is just what can you expect out of transfers, right? So to me, there's a couple different sets of them. There's the ones who are maybe a group of 5 who move up to Power 5. And so maybe they're trying to prove something, and maybe the expectation for me is a little bit more. And then you have guys like, we'll talk Julian Fleming for a minute, who you're chasing Ohio State and Michigan if you're Penn State, and he was not a big-time receiver at Ohio State. And now is it injuries? Is it opportunity? Or is it we just overrated him coming out of high school? Is it a combination of everything? So my expectation is tempered. But you also realize that Julian Fleming also makes Penn State's receiver room better from a maturity standpoint, from a size, even from talent. So maybe he gets more opportunity there. Like, he may be one of Penn State's better receivers, and maybe he couldn't crack the top 3 at Ohio State kind of deal. So I look at it a bunch of different ways, and I know I'm kind of jumping ahead, and then you look at Nolan Rucci, who had somebody in front of him at Wisconsin who's probably going to be an NFL guy, right? And he wants to play, comes back home. They had a coaching change at Wisconsin and has more time. It's not just a one-year fix. So I'm kind of all over the place, and I really think you have to look at how a player fits because, again, Penn State may take the corner out of Florida to be a depth guy where they need it, right? They need experience. They need stuff like that. Maybe they don't need him to be a starter. And so I've changed my thought on I can't really just look overall at a picture of a recruiting of a transfer class. I kind of have to see what they need and what their expectation is out of him.
You mentioned Fleming. I remember being at the same camps as you, following him along the way and his recruitment as that evolved. And he was always one of the top talents on the field, finished number 1 in 24/7 sports rankings for the position back in 2020. What do you recall about Fleming as a recruit coming out of the high school level? What went down with Penn State? And what do you make of this kind of full circle moment for him and James Franklin when he takes the plunge in the transfer portal and James Franklin's waiting right there to make that phone call and reinitiate contact?
Yeah, I mean, there's a lot of things that jump out. First of all, Julian was always so much fun to deal with. I mean, he was a highly rated kid that was accessible, that understood what the process was, and always had time to chat. As a player, he had great size. He got out of breaks incredibly fast. He had strong hands. He could get down the field. And I just remember him, I think we were up at the Jets facility, Tyler, watching him in one of the camps. And geez, just his ability to run across the field and catch the ball and then go up the field, it's like, man, this kid's an absolute stud. Now, what happened at Ohio State? A lot of things happen, right? You go against better players. Maybe, I know Julian's mentioned that he had some injury things there. You have to be able to pick up the offense. You have to be better than the guy ahead of you on the depth chart. And then all of a sudden, Marvin Harrison really develops to a level that we all thought he was good, but I don't think anybody thought to that level. And so you look at a lot of different things that take place, but at the end of the day, Penn State needs a reliable receiver. I mean, shoot, from watching them all season, Tyler, that was the case. I know in the bowl game, it must have come up with the coaching staff during their production meetings, because the announcers were hitting on it really hard about the need for just more talent in the receiver spot. And so just because he wasn't the first or second option at Ohio State, maybe Penn State's not maybe, but their receiver room is not to that level. So he will be an upgrade. I'm kind of more in the wait and see mode, because at his size, if he was going to run those great times and had a bunch of production, he was going to go to the combine, right? He wasn't going to go for another year of college. But yeah, I remember a wildly talented kid.
While we're at that position, neither of these guys are among the early enrollees that I want to dive into with you in a moment, but we're at receiver. It is a pressing need if they want to take the next step next season and elevate Drew Aller's game as well. So Josiah Brown's the only January enrollee from that receiver class, and unfortunately, he's in recovery mode right now from an injury. You get Peter Gonzalez and Tyseer Denmark on campus before preseason camp. It's a lot to ask out of anyone. I think we've seen here at receiver how difficult it can be for a true freshman to break through. Jahan Dotson comes to mind, but really not a lot of guys have done it as I've been covering the team. When you look at those two, Gonzalez coming from Pittsburgh and then Denmark from Philadelphia, what do you make of their ability to be immediate contributors? And is that asking too much from either of them right now in their career?
Tyler, I'm really glad you used the word contributor instead of impact, because that's what it is, right? Especially freshmen and early in the year. Can Peter Gonzalez or Tyseer Denmark get in for 10 to 15 plays early in the season per game? And I think that's realistic. You look at Gonzalez, his dad was a quarterback at Pitt, student of the game. I'm not really worried. He'll know the offense. He'll know what he needs to do. Physically, he'll be able to block on the perimeter. He's going to have to learn how they want it blocked. It's a whole new scheme that he's going to learn with a new offensive coordinator who, look, I watched him a lot at Kansas because I happen to know some people out at Kansas, and he is a guy that really likes to find ways to get playmakers the ball in space, and he's going to get a chance to see some of those playmakers in the spring, and Peter Gonzalez and Tyseer Denmark will not be there in the spring to be able to get that opportunity. And so I also think you're looking at two different types of players. Gonzalez is kind of a bigger body who I view more as a possession guy who probably can get down the field, but, get out of your routes and, be that guy who can catch the 8 to 12 yard pass and be consistent there. And then you look at Denmark, who I view more as a slot guy and kind of crafty and gets out of breaks and can get some separation running across the field, has the ability to go deep, really good ball skills. I've seen both of them perform live, a handful of times, and they're both impressive in different ways. And so you get to training camp, right? That's what we're talking about. Get them in training camp. How quick can they deal with the speed, understand the scheme, know what their route concepts are and which way they're supposed to break depending on what the safety's doing or what coverage it is. It's a lot to ask when you don't have the spring experience. Now, listen, they're going to be able to see every spring practice on tape and get all that other stuff, and they'll be fine with that. But there's no substitute for experience. And as spring ball has evolved in the last 10 to 15 years, it's a lot like bowl practices. It's not for the veterans. It's for the young guys to get a lot of reps that maybe they wouldn't get. And a lot of guys who are true freshmen who wind up playing during the fall usually have a good experience and do well in spring practice and kind of use that as a stepping stone. And then I'll go back to how you opened it with the contributor stuff. Listen, man, if you're asking receivers to come in and be that and be an impact in the offense, boy, you're going to have trouble. So that's why I say I'm glad you used contributor. If both of these kids wind up playing maybe 15, 20 plays a game, I think it's a successful season. I could also see either one or both redshirting.
Yeah, and when I mentioned that year that Dotson was able to burn redshirt, I mean, I don't think he was more than wide receiver 3 over the course of that season. I think that was kind of his ceiling at that stage. And the other one that comes to mind, probably impressive because it was in 2020 during the COVID year, but Parker Washington came to campus and got it going right away from year one. But not a lot of guys have done that. So we'll see. Back over to the recent homecoming pickups out of the transfer portal that have grabbed headlines of late. Nolan Rucci, considered the number 9 offensive tackle in 24/7 Sports transfer rankings. He was considered the number 5 offensive tackle in his 2021 high school class, number 17 overall prospect that year in the cycle. 98 rating puts him firmly in that 5-star territory. And Brian, another guy from within the region that I know you saw grow up along the way at Warwick High School. Can you break down what really stood out about him, made him a truly elite prospect leaving the high school level, and what you now wonder about him and what you still believe about him 3 years later?
Yeah, it's interesting because, you always rely on people within the region to really let you know what's going on in terms of prospects coming up. And I remember Ross Tucker hitting me up going, make sure you know who this kid is early in the process. And it always stuck with me just at how long and athletic he was from that first time. I could still remember opening up the file with his tape, and I was like, ooh boy, this kid's got a high ceiling. And I think that he continues to have one. He's different than a Julian Fleming in that, listen, it's hard to get on the field as an offensive lineman early in your career. It's really hard at a place like Wisconsin where they just cycle through 6'5" to 6'7", 300-pounders who, are pretty much, until Michigan just came along, were the standard of what an grinding offensive line should look like. And so I don't fault him for not getting on the field, but I also know if by year 3 you don't have tape out, getting somewhere in the transfer portal is tough. So I think the timing of it was right for him, and I'm curious, and I like the fact that he has, 3 years left of eligibility still. I love that aspect of it because I think even when you look at a lot of, you look at the Michael Penix, who we just watched in the national championship game, this was not his first year. I like guys that have more than 1 year to settle into their new program and understand what you're going to run either on offense or defense, blocking schemes, how Phil Troutwine is going to coach you. I know why Nolan Rucci picked Wisconsin. He's going to be able to go play with his brother, which is something that is really hard to pass up. I always thought he belonged at Penn State, so I'm excited to see what he does there. I think he'll have a chance, obviously, to compete for playing time right away. But if he's not ready to start right away, I'm still okay with that. I mean, he still has time to develop. And I think one thing you've seen from offensive line coach Phil Troutwine is these offensive linemen now are starting to develop, and it's getting to that point of where you want it to be, to where instead of hoping that somebody's good enough, you're going to have somebody good enough. You just got to figure out who that guy is.
Yeah, I just double checked. Rucci's got 2 years left to play. We all know Fleming's down to his last year. Kimber has 2 years left to play, and then the other pickup, AJ Harris, former 5-star cornerback, has 3 years left in the tank at the college level.
Well, it makes me feel old that he was at Wisconsin. Was he really at Wisconsin for 3 seasons already?
He was there, yeah, redshirt and then 2 seasons tacked on top of it. I know it's amazing to me too that Julian Fleming is using COVID eligibility to stay in college already in year 5.
Well, but, the one thing about Julian is Julian looked like he was 20 when he was 16. So
he did.
He did. Boy, I could have sworn Nolan Rucci was like 6 weeks ago.
Well, I do. You mentioned something there about Phil Troutwine developing these tackles and getting guys in the building. And right now, that's something that really stands out to me. 11 days into 2024, we knew they were going to lose Olu Fashanu. There was some question, would Caden Wallace come back for a 6th year? But the way he played, it didn't make a lot of sense. He took advantage of a rising stock. So you lose 2 bookends that were really good for you for this regular season. And you think about who's next, the names there are all guys that you have evaluated and our rankings team have evaluated very highly in recent years, Brian. I'm just going to read off some of the possibilities who could be involved at tackle here this year, maybe 2025. Nolan Rucci, Drew Shelton, Anthony Donko, who got a lot of run in the Peach Bowl and impressed there, Javen Williams, Chimdi Ono, Garrett Sexton, Cooper Cousins, Alex Birchmeyer. As I said, some of these guys could end up at guard, even center. But what do you think about that assemblage of potential talent and potential starting talent down the road for Penn State that Phil Trautwein has under his roof in 2024?
Yeah, I mean, I think it's why James Franklin hired Phil Trautwein, to be honest. He had a track record. He knew what kind of body types he wanted. And I remember, Tyler, with our old colleague Sean Fitz talking about Anthony Donka, and just when Penn State was going to get him, and we marveled at how long he was and how raw he was, and it was going to take time. And seeing him on the camp circuit and how he moved and how he was able to bend, and his length was – I would be disappointed if he doesn't have a really good Penn State career. And then you look at like Cooper Cousins. Is he going to come in and play a lot right away? I don't know. You would know that better than I. It's really hard to do. But I do know that talking to some of our guys at the All-American Bowl down in San Antonio last week, they were like, yo, this Cooper Cousins cat, man, he's got something to him. And he was really impressed. And he's a smart guy who can play really all three of the interior spots. He'll probably play center, is my guess, at Penn State. But yeah, but this is what really good programs do. They just go on to the next guy. It's, when you talk about Olu and Caden Wallace, I mean, that's what you want. You want guys leaving for the NFL draft. And the idea isn't that it's a one-off. The idea is you just replace them with the next guy who's going to be an NFL offensive lineman. That's the idea. And I go back to now you're gonna what do they call it? Crack some eggs as you're building this stuff. And you a lot of times, like with an Anthony Donka, you're looking for a frame and athleticism, and they hit on that. Well, Malik McNeil had a frame and some athleticism. They did not hit on that. And you understand that. And in this day and age, that's even more realistic because you're willing to take chances because you can get some help in the portal. But I'm not going to sit here and say the offensive line will be just as good, because when you have to replace two NFL guys who don't have any experience, I think that's irresponsible on my part to say that they would be better, but they should be good, right? It's not like you're going to sit there and go like, geez, Penn State can't block. I think those days are over.
Yeah, at offensive tackle and at cornerback right now, because of what they've done and kind of fortifying things, it feels like you lost a lot of talent in those spots. A lot of programs will be pointing to those two areas and saying there's red flags everywhere for what you want to do in 2024. But right now, it feels like the roster's in a generally positive spot in those areas. Same goes for tight end. I mean, you want to talk about losing one guy off to the NFL and replacing him with another piece. That they have done that for years here. Go back to a few different position coaches, and lately it's been Ty Howell, of course. But we just spoke about some former five-star prospects in Fleming and Rucci. Let's talk about a fresh five-star and Luke Reynolds. And you and I both know that those five-star designations don't go out to the tight end position with frequency. There are years where you won't see any go out. You can probably add a lot more, a lot more credence to that statement, Brian. But how big of a deal is it to see a tight end get that five-star status?
Yeah, I mean, you don't get many. Usually one a class if you're lucky, right? Because you're talking about if you're a five-star, we think you're a first-round draft pick, and all you have to do is look at the NFL draft, and there's not a ton of tight ends picked in the first round. I know we can talk about Kyle Pitts, but there's always outliers, right? And so Luke Reynolds is a kid that I was fortunate enough to see, I think maybe 4 times in maybe a 6-month window. And each time I saw him, he impressed me in a different way, just in terms of whether his ability to catch the ball. I remember one day it was raining so hard that I was thinking maybe I need to build an ark, and he's out there catching everything thrown his way in terrible conditions, windy. I go watch him at a workout at his school, and again, he caught everything, looked really good coming off the line of scrimmage, gets out of his breaks. I saw him at Elite 11, where I remember talking with Adam Brenneman about it at that Elite 11 out at State College High, and he's like, man, this cat can go get it, huh? I said, yeah, I'm impressed. And just his athleticism and his length and his size continue to stand out. But then it's like, okay, let's see what happens when he actually puts pads on. I was able to watch him play. Now, look, he's going to have to be a better blocker. And you understand that, considering that up through his junior year, he was a part-time quarterback. And, he and Ryan Puglisi, who signed with Georgia, were actually quarterbacks on the same team at Lawrence Academy in Massachusetts before both of them transferred to Connecticut prep schools. But, I watched him block. He's willing. He wants to be physical. He's going to have to continue to get stronger, but he's a guy that can get out into his route pretty quickly. He is physical after the catch. He'll make some yards after the catch. I view him as a guy who can get down the seam, and also a guy who doesn't mind running that 8-yard curl, turning and catching that first down on 3rd and 6 where you really need it. He's got soft hands, but they're also strong hands. There's so much to like with him that the upside is just immense.
You think that about him and Andrew Rapplier carrying freshman eligibility into 2024, and I've said it throughout the season, really, that if you put Andrew Rapplier in a lot of Power 5 programs, he's going to find his way on the field. He's going to burn red shirt. This is not one of them because of what they have cooking in that tight end room and the health they were able to maintain there as well. But you saw a lot of Rapplier too. So when you think about that being a pair, and this isn't to discount the other tight ends in that room, Jerry Cross and Joey Schlafer, but those two were top 24/7 designations. One's a 5-star. That's quite a tandem at the tight end position that we really haven't seen Penn State tap into yet. And maybe we won't necessarily see them tap into those two in 2024, but I like the odds of one of those guys breaking through.
Yeah, one of the things I really like about Rapplier is he was a pass catcher when he was at high school. I think it was Our Lady of Lourdes in New York he was at, and he transferred to Milton Academy in Massachusetts. And I remember I'm like, they run the ball a lot. He said, yeah, that's why I'm coming here. I can catch it. I need to get better at my run blocking. And that's what he did. He went there and put in a lot of work, just in terms, and I remember seeing him able to sink his hips and really he was willing to be physical in the run game, which, look, you play in the Big Ten, so you can catch the ball, but you better be able to block a little bit too. I think even Gesicki blocked a little bit when he was at Penn State, correct?
Yeah.
And so, yeah, you have that 1-2 punch. And like I said, I've watched this new offensive coordinator a lot. I've probably saw Kansas play on TV probably 20 times in the last 2 years. And he likes to get guys the ball in space to his playmakers and create mismatches. Well, you have two really good athletes who have tremendous size to get the ball in space. And yeah, it's not the same as getting it to maybe a Nicholas Singleton who can go 80 yards at any time, but there's still a lot of talent that can really help out the passing game. And I know the NFL and college are a lot different, but one of my kids is a big Browns fan. And all of a sudden, when Joe Flacco got there, David Njoku started having a really good season, because if you can find that mismatch at tight end, you can really hurt defenses. And that goes, I don't care if it's the NFL, college, or high school, it exists. So I'm excited to see how creative the new OC can be to get these tight ends involved.
You got a very early look at David Njoku. I think maybe the earliest among many. And so, look, I want to talk about another former high school quarterback, because you've got one and Luke Reynolds, who made that transition successfully. How about Garrett Sexton, though? Going from a kid who's playing as an underclassman quarterback, 190, 195 pounds, to now being discussed by the rankings council and ultimately hoisted up as a top 24/7 talent, top 200 overall even talent at the tackle position. You spent some time covering the ground on Cooper Cousins. And when we talk about who could show up and do some damage as an offensive lineman in 2024, I think Cooper Cousins is the proper answer if anyone can do it in that offensive line class. But when I say what's the most fascinating piece of the puzzle here in the next 3 or 4 years, I gravitate towards Garrett Sexton and what he may be able to become on the perimeter. What stood out to you about his trajectory and obviously a lot of confidence to place him quite high in the rankings at the end of the day, a guy who doesn't have a long track record of being a lineman?
No, but I think what you look at is kind of, there's a lot of guys in this situation who, he's got a lot of room for growth. He doesn't have a lot of time on the offensive line. And while that means he needs to work really hard on his technique, he doesn't have those bad habits and those crutches that you lean on that you have to break. So when he gets to campus and he starts working with Phil Troutwine and the rest of the staff, it's the old proverbial ball of clay where you have so much to work with. You have the length and you have the athleticism. Just keep building the frame, building the strength, and check back in a year and a half, 2 years, and see what you have. And it's usually pretty good. We talk all the time about he hasn't played this position much, or can he transition to this position? These guys are incredible athletes, and he is a great athlete for a kid that size. So then it comes down to work ethic, ability to retain information, in terms of technique and assignments. And are you going to be aggressive and go out and hit that dude on the other side of the line of scrimmage and really impose your will on that other player? That's the kind of stuff you're looking at. These are great athletes. Like, there's no doubt in my mind you could have taken like Micah Parsons, put another 30, 40 pounds on him, and he would have killed you as a center, right? These guys are just all great athletes. And so I don't really worry about where they were playing in high school compared to college, unless you're talking about a quarterback who has to learn how to get through progressions and read defenses at high school.
I stayed in the trenches because it went from being a guy near the top of Penn State offensive board, and then all of a sudden he just flipped over to the other side and was near the top of the defensive target board. And Liam Andrews, another player from up north who played at the prep level in New England. He's on campus, and a lot of people are super intrigued by him because we hear so much about, well, maybe one guy thinks he can play on both sides of the ball at a high level Power 5. But usually college staffs don't tend to agree with them. Usually they say, well, we see you here, and that's where the door is open. Penn State had the door wide open on both ends. What did you see from Andrews' ability to go out there and prove that he was a Power 5 defensive prospect? And then ultimately, now that he's locked in there, where do you think the growth comes from?
Yeah, so a couple things. I don't know if Penn State had that door open until last spring. I mean, they were pretty set on offensive line until Wisconsin started talking about D-line, and then I think it was either South Carolina or Miami, one of those, and all of a sudden Penn State went out in the spring. It was like, okay, we better make sure Deion Barnes knows this kid and see where. And so it developed from there. And Tyler, I think he's a really intriguing kid, and I still think this is the case. If you took him and made him an offensive guard, I think he could be a first-round draft pick. As a defensive lineman, I think he's an early round draft pick. And so it comes down to, and we're talking about just talent, right? Just flat out talent. But he wants to play defense. And if you want to do something and your heart is in doing that, your effort, your energy, your focus, everything's going to be just a hair bit better. If you want to play defense, but they're making you play offense, that's always in the back of your mind. Now, I got to see him at a workout. I went and watched his last home game, and he can just maul you on either side of the ball. He's incredibly quick as a defensive lineman. They play him more outside. I think you could kind of move him between the edge and maybe inside. His get off is quick. He's powerful. He's strong. He doesn't give up on plays. The game I was at, it was really unseasonably warm. It was close to 80, and we're talking about mid-November up in Massachusetts. And
sounds nice.
And he was gassed, but he continued to figure out a way to perform play in and play out and give his effort. And in the second half, they ran the ball, I think, all but twice, came back against Brunswick, not Brunswick School, but I think Brunswick High School from Connecticut. But they came back and they won in the second half by running the ball, and it was behind him for the most part. Every time they needed a big run, they went behind him, and it showed me more about his grit and determination. I think when he gets to onto the field at Penn State. He'll continue to learn a technique, and I think he'll be a really good player. I think he'll stay on the defensive side. If he moved to the offensive side, I could see that too. But I just liked his strength, his attitude, his willingness to work. And, we talk about kids when they go through the process of, where does he fit? Where does his personality fit best? And I thought from the first time I spoke with him, I thought he was the kind of kid that should go to Penn State and that Penn State needed to get.
And he's a guy that when we saw him on campus working with Phil Troutwine in the summer of 2022, he was about as good as we've seen from an offensive line prospect standpoint from the start of the day to the finish of the day.
If I remember right, they had Cooper Cousins in that.
Alex Birchmeyer. I think Anthony Donka was on campus. I
think there were 4 commits in him. And I remember because I was at that camp and I remember thinking, oh, yeah, I'm sure that's a coincidence that he's lined up with 4 commits.
Yeah, now it gets real. They're sharing the practice field. I want to go over to the Garden State, an easy trip for you. When I was talking to Alan Zamitis about Vabu Torre, he said, well, football is the family business. And you know that better than anyone being in New Jersey. It's expected when you're in that family. But one thing that they already have a nickname for him, the Hacksaw. They seem to think that he could really tear into opponents as a physical kind of enforcer at the safety position. I know he did some really good things on both sides of the ball during his high school career. I know that you've had eyes on him in different settings, but what do you make of Vabu Torre maybe being that kind of a presence for Penn State as he develops here in the coming years?
Yeah, I think the biggest thing for me, and I've seen him play, probably 3 or 4 times, saw him practice, I think I saw him at a camp somewhere. When I look at the games, I just want to see more consistency. Because there are times where he would flash and you'd be like, oof, man, look at that. And he would pursue and he took great angles and he would hit you. And then there were other times where he just wasn't playing to the level that I expected him to play. I know when I went and watched them I think it was their opener this past year against Camden Eastside, and it was a stunner. They lost at home. And he had to, his brothers who were at Rutgers, Mo Toure, Fama Toure, had to console him on the side. He was so upset. And I remember one of his coaches walking up and saying, this is the kind of emotion we needed you from in the game, not just now. And so there's a ton of talent there. He'll hit you. He can get to the sideline. It just has to be more consistent.
We'll learn more about him. There's a couple teammates that are journeying together to campus that we've seen, John Mitchell and Antoine Belgrave Shorter at cornerback. But on the defensive front, out of Quince Orchard in Maryland, Jalen Harvey, who has been called Baby Chop down within that program for a while now, in reference to Chop Robinson, who could be a first-round pick coming out of Penn State this year. And then Xavier Gilliam, a little bit bigger of a defensive lineman. These are guys that I know the staff is very high on. They think that Jalen Harvey was worth the battle and worth the effort that took, and he's an elite type edge rusher. What do you make of that tandem, I guess, respectively in their own regard, and maybe how they played off of each other as teammates this year?
So has Jalen committed yet, or are we still waiting on that?
I think he's in class, so I hope so. Yeah.
All right, good. I went down and watched them practice during the season. I also went down and watched them both play. And they do exactly what they should do at Quince Orchard. They absolutely dominate. They are so much better than anybody else that they face. And it stands out. I mean, for Jalen, and I had heard this from his junior season, that, hey, man, his first step is quicker than Chop. And I mean, I thought Chop's first step was pretty darn good. And I'm always careful. I think Chop was probably a little bit bigger. And I'm always careful not to put that kind of pressure on a kid, especially if, Chop has a chance to go in the first round and, this kid could come have a great career and everybody think it's a disappointment if it doesn't live up to that. But he's explosive off the edge, has really good body control. He's got thickness in his lower body. He'll get stronger. He'll be able to play at 255, 260. It's probably 245 when I saw him play. Really good change of direction and really competitive. And he's quiet. You know, he's not the most rah-rah guy, but he competes hard, you know, from play to play. And it's important to him to be really good. And then Gilliam, who I think transferred in, I think he was at Wild Lake, wherever he transferred in from, right?
Yeah.
And you put him in the middle. And again, you're talking about Maryland public school football, which does not have a lot of great players on the offensive line who are going to be able to handle guys like Harvey and Gilliam. Gilliam, I think, is an interior guy who is able to get up the field quickly. He's long, and he was hard to block one-on-one. And so when they would devote 2 to him, that meant you couldn't devote 2 to Harvey on the outside. And so the secondary was just back there having like cups of tea most games. But for Gilliam, I think he's probably around 260, 265. It's going to have to be a progressive weight gain to where he can get up to the 285, 290 range if he's going to play inside. Now, I know, you know, I've talked to him and he says, hey, he can play outside or inside. He'd like to play outside. I just think with his skill set and he plays low, and he could really, you know, if he continues to build his strength and size, he can really be a guy that anchors at the point of attack and lets some other guys make some plays, and he'll make his own as well. But yeah, I think there are 2 kids that are really interesting to watch because the jump in competition from high school to college is huge. And then when you're talking about from the line of scrimmage from Maryland public high school football to the Big Ten and trying to contend for a playoff berth, it's a really big leap. It's going to take some time, I think.
Just a few more of these recently enrolled freshmen I wanted to get to. And one of them is another who had, like, is he a defensive end? Is he a defensive tackle kind of conversation going on? And Penn State, as far as I understand it, was ahead of the curve with a lot of teams in this recruitment with DeAndre Cook and identifying him as somebody that was going to be an interior fit at the next level. Played end down at Friendship Academy. You could say he was overshadowed certainly by a 5-star teammate there, Alabama signee Dylan Stewart, on the same defensive line. But when you look at DeAndre Cook and a guy who's going to make that progression inside, and again, Penn State seems very excited about that. What stood out about what you've seen thus far, and then what that next step might be?
Yeah, I saw DeAndre in person a few times. I went and watched him play in late November, and he's big. Like he's big. He's physical. He's strong. He's got quickness. And, you know, until Penn State got involved, I thought he was going to wind up probably at Rutgers. It was a place that he really liked a lot until Penn State came in, and he's like, oh, yeah, I could go play in front of 100,000 and on that defensive line compete for a playoff spot. And what I like about him is exactly what you said. You know, teams looked at, is he is he a guy who plays on the edge? Can he play in the middle? And I think he's, at the end of the day, I think he's probably an interior guy. But he's also a guy that if you're going to run in some dime packages and have 3 down linemen, he could play on the outside. And so he's going to offer that kind of versatility. He's a strong kid. He'll have to get stronger. Technique, he's going to have to really work on staying low at the snap. He does it, but not as consistently as he's going to need to do it. And, you know, I watched him. He can be physical. And you mentioned Dylan Stewart, you know, the 5-stars going to South Carolina. They made it a lot like Gilliam and Harvey, where, look, if you're going to double one, you're not doubling the other. And so when I watched DeAndre Cook go one-on-one, it would be like me trying to block him. Like not me 30 years ago who wouldn't be able to do it then either, but like me now. And so it's just blow by after blow by. And so to me, he is a really intriguing kid because I think he has a really high ceiling and a lot of room for growth, especially from a technique standpoint.
In this defensive line class, Brian, and maybe overall this entire class, the guy that carries some mystery to him is T.A. Cunningham, because he was one of the first 2024 prospects that anybody heard about, right? And he made his mark early on in the high school fields of Georgia. He finished his high school time in Georgia before making the move to Happy Valley. In between, though, went coast to coast at high-level programs, Southern California and then South Florida, and along the way did not accrue many game snaps. And he went from one of the most notable figures in this recruiting cycle to a guy who finished with a 3-star rating from 24/7 Sports as the number 61 overall defensive lineman. Brian, for those who maybe don't understand how the recruiting world and universe works, but a guy who's been this exposed for this long and the way it kind of turned out, not correlating with the initial kind of prognosis on his rating, what is Penn State getting here? Because I know they feel like they're getting a potential diamond in the rough, a potential steal if it pans out for them within their culture.
Well, I think just how you put it, if it pans out, right? I mean, it's not good when you're not playing football. And it's really not good when nobody can figure out what high school you're at. And so there were a lot of concerns with that stuff. And is it the end all be all? No, he's a kid, and some things happen to where, maybe you think one situation is better than the other. But I've been doing this a long time. I've been involved with sports as my profession for more than 3 decades. And a lot of it has been with either high schools or colleges and covering that stuff. And this is not the usual path kids take. And so there's concern there. And we'll see what happens, and we'll see how he works out at Penn State, if he's able to fit. I hope he does. I mean, he's a kid, right? You want to see anybody have success. You don't wish ill toward anybody. But when you're moving around schools and you're not playing, and it's tough to figure out, even the people recruiting them are trying to figure out what's going on, that's usually not a great sign. And so you hope that in 3 years we talk about how, well, this is what he overcame. And that's what the goal is on this one, I think.
Instantly becomes one of the bigger physical presences on this team as he gets settled in on campus, and we'll see where it goes from there with him. Brian, I wanted to finish in the offensive backfield. A couple highly rated prospects joining the party at quarterback and running back. We'll start with the QB from the same training lineage as Drew Aller. With Brad Mendler is Ethan Grunkemeyer. This is another one that was very much involving the Mike Yurcich relationship. It weathered the storm beyond that. Andy Kotelnicki is now in charge of the offense, and Ethan Grunkemeyer was on this podcast and explained how excited he was for that prospect. What do you think about the pickup for Penn State here? Because one way or another with Drew Aller in 2024, we're going to learn a lot about him. If things go well, quarterbacks usually don't stick around at the college level like him very long, but he's still got plenty to prove. We're wondering what the future of the position might look like too. How do you think Grunkemeyer factors in based on what you've seen from him being a big riser in our rankings?
Yeah, and getting to see him at Elite 11 at State College, it was different, right? It was not what I expected out of him. I thought he was going to be a kid who just, can get back in the pocket and absolutely rip it. And I'm not saying he can't, but what stood out to me was he changed arm angles on that camp. I remember talking to somebody right out of the camp about his mechanics, and they were talking about how, listen, quarterback mechanics are changing a little bit. The arm angle isn't really up as high. Sometimes it's to the side a little bit more, just because it creates more torque, more velocity. You can spin it more as long as you can be accurate. And the day I saw him, his accuracy wasn't the best, but then in speaking to other people throughout the fall, and, I think he also went to Elite 11 finals, and where it was a lot better. You kind of saw the progression, and it's a lot in the elevation of his ranking and everything. It's a lot in what Penn State did with Drew Aller. He was ranked at a certain spot, and then it was like, oh, Penn State found one ahead of the curve, and he kept going up and up. And obviously Grunkemeyer didn't go as high as Drew did, but still a guy that you really feel like could be something special in the program moving forward. Now, that said, if you look at college football, there are a ton of transfer quarterbacks, and transfers play at a lot of these places that go to the playoffs. And so I'm curious to see what happens. Drew has a good year but doesn't leave. What happens with Ethan? You know, I'm curious, and unfortunately, those are some of the discussions that we have now, because kids don't want to wait, or NIL runners are always in the DMs of people. But I think it's a big year for Drew to kind of elevate his game, which is fine, right? He had 1 year starting experience, so let's see what he does with an off season. He, you know, not only do you have to know your offense, you have to know the other defenses. And so now he has more of a chance to understand how to learn that stuff too in the off season. And if he is wildly successful, can they get Ethan time during the season anyway? I think we're at a point now where you have to try to get 2 quarterbacks reps. And then what does that do for Bo Prabula, who, you know, had some pretty good plays
been
this
the other
season.
quarterback getting the reps. Yeah.
And so it's going to be an interesting quarterback room. But if you're going to be good, you have to have a good quarterback room with the understanding that quarterback room could change.
Yeah, well, they've had no issues bringing talent to the running back room, Brian. And let's finish there with the highest rated player out of the state of Pennsylvania and the latest in-state running back standout to continue his career with the Nittany Lions. We've seen a lot of success stories from that route, Nick Singleton being the latest. But Quentin Martin making the move from Bell Vernon. He has been on the Penn State's radar and your radar throughout his high school career. How do you believe he finished it out, improving his value to an offense? And how much can his receiving skills, you believe, maybe translate into getting him on the field at the next level?
Well, I mean, if you can catch it, it really helps out a lot, right? I mean, it just gives you another chance to get the ball in space. And, you know, again, go look at how Kansas did it with the Neal kid, who, you know, had a couple career year back to back, was unbelievable, and they were able to get him the ball in space and do stuff. And if you can catch it, that, you know, it just adds to what you can bring to an offense. And, you know, there were times where, you know, I'd watch Quentin at a camp or workout or a 7-on-7, and there was the discussions of, okay, is he going to be a safety? Is he going to be a receiver? Is he going to be a running back? I always thought running back, but that I would even entertain the other positions tells you what kind of athlete he is. And so could you see us in a situation where Singleton's in the backfield and Martin's in the slot on a play or two, or out wide? Yeah, you could see that. And listen, in college football, NFL, whatever, you need more than one running back. 2 is good. If you have 3, that's even better in case there's an injury. So they'll have some depth. They'll have time to learn. At the running back spot, man, your shelf life is so short in a career that it's okay if your reps and your hits are limited your first 2 years of college. So I think he'll get his feet wet this year. I think he'll probably have some plays where you're like, oof, I kind of like to see more of that. And then just kind of move into the rotation as Singleton decides what he wants to do after the year.
And it's interesting, he's following up a class that the first time we've ever seen Jaywan Sider apply red shirt to a running back here in a freshman class at Penn State. I believe Jaywan said it was his first time redshirting any running back anywhere. He did it twice with this freshman class with London Montgomery, who was coming off an injury, and then Cam Wallace out of Georgia. Neither of those guys even entered a game. So that's the class that Quentin Martin is following up here to campus. While we do have you, I did want to pick your brain on one more guy, and he's already on campus for a year now, but a lot of people talking about him right now. And you lose Chop Robinson, you lose Adiza Isaac. What's next to the edge position? Well, denied Dennis Sutton's a nice solution, but Jameel Lyons suddenly looks like a real legitimate option in 2024, Brian. Can you just give us the lowdown on what stood out to you on his journey as a 4-star prospect in Philadelphia? And I'm not sure if you're getting feedback as well here, but the way he finished with bowl prep and in the game itself, he is arguably one of the buzzier names coming out of the 2023 calendar right now for Penn State.
You know, it's funny that you bring him up, because I spoke to somebody about him Wednesday afternoon. We were just talking about players, right? And different guys. And I was talking about another player in the region, and he goes, "Well, look, man, he's not Jameel Lyons." And I said, "Yeah, I understand that." And the follow up was how explosive Jameel was, how long he is. Now, he's a kid. When I first saw him, it was at a 7-on-7 down in Washington, D.C., and this dude's lined up as a receiver. And just to give an idea, he looked like the same characteristics and features as Julian Fleming did, right? Just in terms of length, and John Mule's a little bit taller and everything. But and I keep going back to thinking of that and how athletic he looked. And I saw him, and then I saw him play in a game, and I'm like, he didn't do a lot. And I saw him again later in that season. I think that was his junior year. And he was like crazy explosive and used his hands well and could get around the edge. And so you saw the talent, you saw the progression. I know in talking to him, not only on the field, but in the classroom, he put in a ton of work after his sophomore season to make sure that he was on the right path to be able to get to college. And so the work ethic's there. He's a great kid. Like, he was always so much fun, so easy to deal with in recruiting. And even after he committed and you talked to him, he was sensational. And so it makes all that sense. And you mentioned Adisa Isaac, who, again, is another tremendous kid who has just I look at what he's gone through with his family, and I just root for him so hard to have success in life, because he never complains about anything. And then you look at Nittany Lions, who was further along from a strength standpoint than Adisa was, maybe not quite as twitchy, but he had a lot of things going his way. So to hear that Nittany was doing well at Penn State, A, it's nice to hear, because you always like to hear that kids you cover are doing well. And B, it's not a surprise, because what the package was there. It's just that Penn State got on him so early and put together a path to get him to Penn State that people easily forgot about him just because he wasn't out there waiting until the last 2 months or making a ton of visits.
Yeah, he put a nice reminder up for everybody. That goes back to early practices for him in August. It's been mounting that Lions came in ready to roll, and he burned redshirt by the end of it, and could be a big piece for that defense. Brian, appreciate so much perspective on a whole lot of new names for Nittany Lions fans to get used to. Some familiar names, but they're new here on campus, and so we really appreciate it.
Hey, man, anytime. You guys know that.
All right, take care.
Thank you.
Good stuff from Brian Dohn, as always, national analyst with 24/7 Sports, giving you the best on the recruiting world, and really as well as the transfer portal, because so many of those relationships that him and our network of industry analysts establish with high school talent extends 2, 3, 4 years down the road when they pop up in the transfer portal, and it's time to go through the process a bit again. So thanks to Brian. Before him, we had Tyler Calvaruso breaking down the 2 cornerback pickups out of the SEC for Penn State out of the transfer portal. What a busy January it has been for the Nittany Lions, not just in the portal, but adding more than a dozen new freshmen to campus. I think we covered just about all of them there with Brian, but plenty of coverage coming your way at lions247.com about these new pieces of the roster, how they all matter for position by position, and ultimately putting together those pieces as Penn State tries to make its plunge into the inaugural 12-team college football playoff that awaits at the end of this year in 2024. We'll be back with a couple new episodes next week. There'll probably be plenty more to discuss, as there always is. For now, stepping aside on behalf of the entire Lions 24/7 community, I am Tyler Donahue. We'll talk to you real soon right here on the Lions 24/7 podcast.